Welcome to primalbrain.com with Tim Ash. Hi, welcome everyone. This is Tim Ash, and I want to welcome you all to my first Ask Me Anything or AMA event. Glad to have you all here, and I'm completely at your disposal. I'd be glad to answer whatever questions you have about anything because it's Ask Me Anything. So feel free to introduce yourselves when you first, ask a question, and maybe give some quick background about where you are, what you want to get out of this, and ask away.
So my name is Brad Slavin. I have been a follower of Tim's for a while, seen him speak at some conferences, and I'm a small business owner here located in Southern California. We do online email security, and almost all of our lead generation is inbound. So speaking to the customer, speaking in their language, conversion optimization, things like that have always been interesting and appealing to me. And when doing those things, I find it's best to go to the source. So that's why I'm here.
All right, great. And again, this is not just to ask me anything. If you guys have comments for each other or reflections on what I'm saying, feel free to interact directly. I don't want it to be like, just all focused on me, but yeah, go ahead and ask away anything that's on your mind or that you're interested in.
So Tim, hi everyone, I'm Allie Harris. I'm a marketing consultant focused on demand generation and inbound marketing. I've known Tim for a number of years. Tim, what inspired you to write the book?
Wow. Okay. Well, so I actually went to University of California, San Diego. I came out here originally, and I had a dual major in computer engineering and cognitive science. So I've always been interested in the brain and how it works. And my graduate work was in machine learning, I guess you'd call it these days, neural networks, artificial intelligence. So again, kind of a tie to the brain and learning. And I applied it to marketing throughout my career, but I've always just been fascinated. I think the brain is the last frontier. We're going inward instead of outward to the cosmos, and it's the most complex object we've been able to discover in the universe. So lots of stuff to mine there.
What's the coolest thing you've learned while writing the book?
God, there's so many insights in the book that I just, but the one that that was really an eye-opener for me, I have a couple of chapters on it, is that culture evolved us and we evolved for culture. In other words, sorry, I think it might have been a dropout. One of the key things that I learned is that culture evolved us and we evolved to transmit culture. So in the book, I talk about, like, imagine there are 200 different species of squirrels. Some are a few grams, some are a few kilograms, some have wings to fly between trees, some hibernate. I mean, they're adapting physically to their environment across a wide range of environments. Human beings are basically the same in all environments. I mean, the pygmies are a little bit shorter than the Dutch or the tallest, but different colors, different eye colors, but we placed one big bet, which was on learning and transmitting culture. So that's really, we're designed for that, for culture spread. So we're students and imitators, and we want to mentor and help people. That's part of why I'm doing this, I think. But deep-seated, the whole idea is that we can learn more from our surrounding tribe than we could ever figure out in a lifetime by ourselves. And that's what gives us our species edge. Not physical adaptations to the environment. Hey, Mark, Erica, welcome. If you guys could flip your videos on, if you have it, that would be great. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah, the culture gene coevolution, the key point there is that like our brains needed to get bigger to be able to transmit culture. In order to do that, a lot of other adaptations happened. For example, we'll learn to cook food. That allowed our digestive system to become smaller because we can extract food out of essentially pre-digested cooked food. We can extract energy from it. So that's a genetic level adaptation, a physical one, because we had brains big enough to harness fire. Another one is, we were able to run. We're very slow runners, but we have good endurance. And one of the cool things about that is that we have very efficient cooling systems. We sweat much more efficiently than any other animal, but in order to do that, we have to find lots of water. So the cultural package of being able to find water on the move is what allows us to be like long-term runners and hunters of prey. So again, it's a physical adaptation, but based on our ability to learn something culturally. So culture gene coevolution is a huge eye-opener for me.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, Erica, Mark, if you have video, feel free, or I encourage you to flip it on so we can see you. Thank you.
Well, I may show up.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. And Erica, you're also muted, so feel free to unmute yourself.
No, I'm better off muted.
Okay. No, we're here to ask questions. Okay. Who's next? Don't be shy. I don't bite.
I mean, I can keep going and totally monopolize this because I have 1,001. So,
We got a thumbs up from Brad.
So tell me about recording the audiobook, because I've seen a couple little posts and I want to know more about this.
Okay, well, so one thing I was told, and being a public speaker and a keynote speaker myself, I figure it's like, I can't not record the audiobook. I have to do it. But also,
Right.
Apparently, people that listen to audiobooks a lot prefer nonfiction authors to actually record their own books. So that's kind of the state of the art. So I wanted to figure out how to do it. And so the first thing was creating an environment where I could record it. Now, I'm in my home office right now, and I built myself not a sound isolation booth. Hey, Mark, welcome. But rather a sound absorption booth. Most people have the mistaken idea that you need a perfectly quiet environment. Hey, welcome, Erica. You don't need a perfectly quiet environment. What you need is a very direct relationship between the microphone. This is the one I use, the Blue Yeti, incidentally. It's a great USB.
Very pretty.
I'm compensating, obviously.
It matches your shirt. I like that.
I have one in every color, yes. But one of the things that was important is that this is an intimate conversation. Reading an ebook or an audiobook is supposed to be like talking to someone over a cup of coffee. That's the vibe you want. And in order to do that, you want to take out the room echoes. If you actually listen right now to my sound, there's a lot of bouncing off the walls and floors and windows, all the hard surfaces in the room. So I built a sound isolation booth out of PVC pipe, the same stuff you use to do sprinkler systems. Has all these cute little joints, like a T-joint or an elbow joint, so you can put them together like Legos or Tinker Toys. And so I built this frame about 4 feet by 4 feet by about 6.5 feet tall. And then I covered the outside with moving blankets on curtain rods. And that created an environment where all of the sound that's not going from my mouth directly into the mic is just absorbed by the moving blankets. And so I sat there in this dark little booth with a chair that doesn't squeak, with a little table, with the laptop so I can flick my script up without making any mouse sounds, touchscreen laptop. And I spend about an hour a day in there. Then the post-processing is a whole nother thing if you want to ask about that.
Let's ask about that.
So there's a free software package called Audacity, which is apparently, in the public domain, and lots of people support it. And so I learned how to use that, and it has a lot of presets. So the standard for the audio is determined by Audible, which is Amazon's audio partner or division. And so what I did was I got these little macros, which would take my sound and do all the stuff to it, expand it, get rid of make a lower noise floor and things like that. But one of the things that I had to do manually was yoga to take out your breath sound. So when I'm speaking, and then I speak some more, these little breath sounds with a good mic are actually captured on the mic, and Audible hates that. So you have to go through and insert room noise everywhere where you take a breath, which is a lot. So I actually did that post-processing myself and took out all the breath sounds too.
How many breath sounds did you have to take out?
Well, the way that from recording a chapter to post-processing is about a 2-to-1 ratio for me. So there's 5 hours plus of recorded audio. That means 10 hours plus of making that recording audio after you record it. You know, about 2-to-1 ratio. Some people say 3-to-1, but I got through their technical check first time through, so they didn't complain about it. Yay. Digital marketing, evolutionary psychology, why I left the Soviet Union, anything's fair game here.
Digital psychiatry?
Digital psychiatry? No,
digital psychiatry.
I'm not sure you want me. I'm pretty messed up myself. I would want to, do more damage to you, Mark.
You're doing okay.
Hey, Tim, I'm Lauren. I've been an online furniture retailer for about 16 years. Tim, I have a question about the millennial brain versus non-millennial brains. Any comments?
Well, the reason I wrote this book was to talk about evolution and what all of us, the 8 billion of us on the planet, have in common. So I tried to stay away from anything that was a fly in amber or specific to a group. That's not in the book. I mean, I think that, again, coming back to the idea of culture evolving us, our brains are there to soak up as much information as we can. They're not fully mature till we're 25 in terms of executive function and self-control and things like that. And the first 5 are really critical. You can think of it almost as a hardwired level. Whatever happens in the first 5 years is, we're learning a lot. So the cultural package that we get is definitely different from generation to generation. That's one thing I'd say. And so I'm a Gen Xer, but so millennials are definitely different than I am. Personally, don't necessarily want to get into what it's like. I didn't enjoy having them as employees, but I can't kind of talk about the whole generation, but there it is. And one of the things that I would say, though, that's was also from an evolutionary psychology interesting is that when we transmit culture, we place a premium on older people. The reason is they survived, for one thing, to teach us the culture, and they know more, they've seen more, okay? That assumption only works if your environment doesn't change. Does that make sense? So if you're born in 1000 AD and the next generation was 1020 AD, your life's pretty much the same, and it's going to be the same 100 years from now. So elders really were the keepers of knowledge. As knowledge speeds up and changes faster, the role models we look to for learning become younger and younger to stay on the cutting edge of whatever we're talking about. So, my kid, as an insult to me, said, "Yeah, Dad, you grew up in the 80s, and so, the world's so different now." But, he's absolutely right. I'm not his peer. I don't necessarily understand his world. So with the acceleration of change in society and in culture, older people become less and less relevant in a sense. Yes, we have that storehouse of, you could say, permanent or life wisdom, but in terms of practical wisdom, the fact that I know how to rewind my VCR tape doesn't help my kids. And so I think there's less respect and a lot of ageism as a practical matter right now that we're facing as a society, and millennials being in charge. I'm 55, I think kind of like, yeah, who are you, old man? If I didn't shave my head and get rid of the gray hair and my beard and stuff, there's a lot of that. And it's because the cutting edge of culture is no longer with a generation that's older.
Okay,
How do you think that changes things from a digital marketing perspective, targeting the younger and younger folk who may necessarily not have the income, influencing the older generation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things I heard once, that our conception of technology is formed between the ages of about 8 and 12. Okay, so if I look back what that is for me, it's television, it's record players, It's phones that hang on the wall and are plugged into the wall. Okay, and things like that. Cassette tapes that you rewind with a pencil if the tape gets a little weird. So those.
What are these museum pieces that you discussed?
Exactly right. So
now.
And so with that, hey, I resemble that remark. So joking aside, though, that means that if we're designing for younger people, we have to make sure that we're getting the input of people that are using the technology, and not bring our own views to what technology means. So I think outreach to not just millennials, but Gen Z, my kids' generation, post 2000 is where you should be looking, not necessarily for culture or style stuff. God forbid I like the music or something these days, but I'm just talking about how they interact with technology. If you look at their habits and things like that, I think we can gain a lot by doing qualitative research with younger people.
So, Tim, so who is your audience for the book? Because I've just gone back and I've read your synopsis on Audible. Is this a switch for you from LPO to cognitive science, or is there a blend that we're going to feel inside of the book?
Well, okay, so fair question. So my first book, as you may know, came out in 2008. That's the first edition of my landing page optimization book. The second one in 2012, which 12 years ago in internet time. I like to think I put a lot of evergreen stuff in there, but I've been dinged by those very same millennials on webinars for having screenshots that are a decade old. It's like, hey, grandpa, get some new examples. I'm like, well, I'm making a point about trust symbols or something on a web page, and that shouldn't require an updated example. Sorry, you can't do the translation, but
yeah,
there
trustee
it is.
Or anything else.
Yeah. So, I think there's still a lot of really solid info there to be mined by anyone who's a practitioner of online marketing. But this book was really divorced from that. So I don't want to be in the conversion rate optimization ghetto, or even digital marketing, or even marketing and neuromarketing outside of that. This book is repositioning me for my keynote speaking career. And it's strictly about evolutionary psychology. So it's intentionally not applied to anything. It's, to answer your question, the three audiences for it would be business and marketing, which is, there's a lot of neuromarketing stuff in there. This is the foundational stuff. You just have to think about what it means to your job. And I think that if you want to have a good career in marketing, you need to understand what you're trying to influence, which is the brain. So I'm basically giving you the operating system. Okay. The second group would be people interested in relationships. So community building, culture, politics, leadership, and how to create a internal corporate culture and how all the basics of that work. And the third audience is really personal development. And this is like, if you want to understand yourself and not have any illusions about how you influence others or how you're influenced by them, how you evolved, what you share with other animals that are more ancient. I kind of start at the beginning of time and go through basic brain chemistry, reptiles, mammals, and then what makes us distinctly human. So it's kind of a evolution. The book itself evolves through those phases. So at the end, I'm talking about things like culture and storytelling and our social natures, gender differences, all of that. But before that, I talk about what we share with mammals and snakes and reptiles and insects, because they all use the same neurochemicals, for example. So there's those three audiences, I would say: business and marketing, relationships and leadership and groups, and personal development. But there's nothing applied in it specifically to marketing. But you can mine it for insights into any of those three areas, I would say.
Tim, okay, so if you go back to, I'm going to drag you back to your landing page optimization. Okay. And would I be somewhat correct that the underlying philosophy of that was stimulus response? That what you were doing with that was trying to help us as marketers figure out what stimulus would lead to the response. Would that be in in any way close to understanding what was going on in those books?
Well, I think that, so there's yeah, that's a great question, Mark. So there's understanding something, and then there's doing something with it. I'd say, you know, in marketing, the broad umbrella that falls under is you're trying to persuade someone to take an action or to change something. Okay. But even persuasion is too broad, because I can say, I can persuade you to lose weight and have better diet habits, or persuade you to stop smoking, or public policy, persuade you to save more for your retirement, you know, or, you know, so it was strictly applied to marketing persuasion. Okay. So in that sense, yeah, it's like, how do you get someone to act? That's,
I want to kind of segue that into the new book, and just wondering whether or not you're seeing any generational differences in how stimulus response is happening.
no,
You know,
this is like the stuff I'm talking about, is so fundamental. The thing you have to realize is, like, modern humans are 200,000 years old. We acquired efficient language maybe 70 to 50,000 years ago, and that's when culture really took off. Okay, but we're talking about where we branched off from pygmy chimps, bonobos, was 5 million years ago. Brains, you know, mammals have been around for close to 500 million years, and life 3.5 billion years before that. So a lot of the stuff that worked, you have to realize this is like a fix on top of a fix on top of a patch on top of a adjustment. Okay, so yes, we have unique capabilities as humans, but most of the stuff we share with earlier life forms. So, you know, you talk about dopamine. That's one of the neurotransmitters I talk about in the book, and people say, well, that's the feel good chemical or something like that. Well, actually, dopamine is there to tell you how to meter your energy, whether to go expend energy on trying to pursue a goal. You know, it gives you the kind of stimulus to go after a reward that you think is nearby. And it also is there to adjust your mental model of the world. It's like, okay, that worked out. That means I'm on track. Or oh crap, that was a big fail, which means that my mental model of the world didn't match the world and I need to fix it. So those foundational kind of chemicals like dopamine exist in fruit flies, you know, as well as humans. And the motivation and decision making and how it drives us is exactly the same. So there's not that much that makes us uniquely human in terms of the neurochemical level, and certainly not across generations. We basically all act the same. That's why I think it's really funny when people talk about business to business marketing versus business to consumer marketing, as if the business to business people don't have a brain that you're also trying to influence.
well, they do. They obviously respond to different types of messages. I mean, they read, or hopefully they read, or they see something and they do whatever.
No, they don't. They're not more deliberate. They don't read. They have the attention span of a lit match, just like you or I do when we're. So no, I think that's my point, is this universal stuff. As a marketer, I would build my career on the durable stuff, and the neuromarketing is that. Understanding brains and evolution is the solid foundation. When I used to run my agency, Site Tuners, we created 1.2 billion in documented value, revenue increases for our clients, from the Googles of the world and Nestle's of the world on down. I'd say 3/4 of that was probably based out on these durable neuromarketing principles and understanding persuasion, not on the tactics. Is this on Twitter? What color is the button? I mean, none of that kind of tactical manipulation. It was just about understanding how people make decisions. So I'd say if you're in marketing, you want to have a durable career, focus on the brain. That's evergreen. It's not changing on the time scale of your lifetime.
How much of that was influenced by, like, the Eisenbergs?
Well, Brian and Jeffrey are good friends of mine, and they were, had, as you know, Future Now Inc. was, one of the first conversion rate optimization agencies in New York. So they were early into this. I think they were working on applied stuff, just like whatever works, and they were experimenting with it in the field. What I'm trying to do by writing this book is to give kind of the why behind evolutionary psychology, how it all fits together. So there's a lot of different perspectives. There's marketing practitioners, there's medical people and medical imaging, there's behavioral economists that try to kind of nudge us with various inputs, as Mark said, kind of like stimulus response to act differently. But everyone's working in their little silos and describing the proverbial elephant from different parts, like the blind man touching the trunk or the tusks or the leg. And I just want to say, here's the elephant. This is how all those things tie together. So I'm trying to be more foundational and give you an accessible framework for that. That's the real goal of the book.
Are you saying that
some of you are old enough to have seen Carl Sagan's show or books, Cosmos?
Sure.
Like billions and billions of stars. I mean, he was like the Neil deGrasse Tyson 1.0, the original guy. And he was just trying to explain astrophysics and make it interesting to the general public. And he did. And I figure if he can do that with astrophysics, this is my attempt to do it with the human brain.
Okay, so over time, are people the same or are they different?
They are the same in terms of the basic mechanisms, but we're remarkably adaptive to our cultural package. And so that's what changes around us. So whatever's happening to you, again, from birth to 5 is super critical. And then it slows down after that. But even, idea spread, you can think of it as like we created language to communicate shared myths, whether it's religion or the concept of money, even whatever your belief system is. Like right now, there's a collision between 2 different myths of capitalism is good. That's one myth, it's most efficient and gets the best for everyone, versus we're about to drive off a cliff of planetary unsustainability, and this is the 6th, major extinction event on the planet, and we're just like happily whistling past the graveyard. Those are 2 belief systems, 2 cultural packages, and depending on which one's inside of your head, you're going to behave different. So behavior can be radically different based on the cultural package that you absorb from your surrounding environment and tribe. But the mechanisms by which you gather information or make decisions, that stuff doesn't change.
Are you finding yourself more or less McLuhan-esque in your view of this?
Okay, unpack that a little for me. The medium is the message?
Yeah, well, the technology defines how you view everything. Whatever that current, when people had watches, time started mattering more. Now that we've got all this other stuff, is it changing humanity?
It is. I think that one of the unfortunate things, we've all seen this, I came to this country in the early mid-70s, and there's, in the political sphere, for example, there was 4 major networks. There were 2 parties, but they got along. There was a guy named Tip O'Neill that walked across the aisle and made deals with people on various stuff. I mean, and now you have this extreme degree of polarization, and it's because we're in echo chambers. And so the spread of information and misinformation is much faster and more corruptive. And I'm guilty of this as much as anyone. I talk to my tribe, and they're reinforcing my ideas, politically, socially, and so on. And I don't hear from the people I consider to be the wackos on the other side, okay? And so one of the things that's important to understand is we have a really strong need for tribal and cultural cohesion. We will ape and mimic the behavior of those around us. We can't avoid it. No one grows up in a vacuum. And people will sneak ideas into our head. They'll also censure us to various degrees if we don't comply with tribal norms. Okay, you'll get everything from laughed at, gossiped about, kicked out of the tribe, excommunicated, or killed, depending on the degree of your social transgression. And the reason for that is because we want to spread culture out efficiently, and that's our adaptive edge. We really have to kind of take things at face value. This is truth. The earth is flat, or there is no climate change, or whatever your current, kind of meme is. That has to spread efficiently, which means it has to be uncorruptible and unchanged. And so we're there to absorb things just by imitation and mimicking, and in a way, you could say we trust culture and what people tell us around us over our own direct experience. And that has some scary implications for society and its fragmentation. And people that can manipulate us with propaganda and things like that.
That's an obvious, how can you say, impact of the last 40 or 50 years of communication in the political sphere.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's an awful lot of people that won't vote for themselves, you know, that for some reason another message has gotten in to interrupt their own self-interest, and it's hard to imagine how that's worked. But you're saying it's the identification with a tribe of
and moreover, there's research. This is across all cultures and time frames. There's research that says who we like to learn from is very much our surrounding tribe. So you can think of our evolution as being, at least within the human species, as being competition between groups or among groups. So we want to kind of learn from people that are most likely to be our tribe and transmit our values, which means same gender, same ethnicity, same language. I mean, kids would prefer to listen to nonsense in their native dialogue than nonsense in another dialect. Even the sounds that we prefer, we're conditioned to before we can even speak or understand them. So we learn from co-ethnics. Like I said, there is some preference for learning from elders, but basically people like us. And so if there are cultural signs too, and how they dress, how they behave, tribes are there to self-reinforce because that group cohesion gives us an advantage. So we always form into tribes, sometimes over the dumbest differences. I remember I was spent a couple of weeks because the U.S. Naval Academy was trying to recruit me out of high school. So we spent 2 weeks at Annapolis on campus, and they took us to a Baltimore Orioles game. And so we're all wearing these little Naval Academy white t-shirts, and we sat there in the stands and we rooted for the Detroit Tigers. Oh man, did everybody else in that stadium hate us. And we were just having a little fun, right? A couple of hundred high school kids. But, it's so easy to form tribes over team affiliation. Who cares? I'm sorry if any of your sports fans, but that's just part of our need to be tribal. And once you start down a certain path, you start kind of reinforcing that, and that just creates separation. We don't have to have a good reason for it. It's just our tendency. I'm sorry if I'm depressing anyone. Yeah.
No, you're not. You're not at all. Do you have any thoughts on how the COVIDization of social contact is gonna work through everything? I mean, is it going to modify how people's brains and in the case of the last thing, the tribes and how they communicate in their tribes? I mean, are we in for a long one?
Well, I think that the only way to, the best way to decrease bias and tribal affinity, if you will, is exposure to other cultures. And that's, so if you travel, if you interact with others, if you are open to dialogue and conversation, no matter how big the differences are, you get a broader worldview. One of the interesting things I've seen on the political sphere, and I don't talk about this in the book, but that there's kind of a continuum of concern, okay? Let's say me, my family, my religious group, where I worship or something like that, my town, my nation, the whole planet of humans, animals, the whole universe, right? So there's this continuum. And what they've shown is that people that tend to be politically conservative have a more local sphere of concern. They're more concerned with family, community, church, for example, in this country, whereas I guess you'd call more progressive people care about the world, the planet, animal rights, a much wider out there range of concerns on that end of the spectrum. So I thought that was really interesting. One of the prescriptions I talk about at the very end of the book is try to attach to as wide a tribe as possible. Don't be so parochial in your tribe. Don't attach to too small of a tribe. Try to go for as wide a span as you can reach. And it's hard because, again, we're programmed early in life by that and by all of our life experience to identify with something. But that's my prescription for trying to hold the center together.
Hi, Tim. Do you have any tips on how to open to other cultures?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's a habit, like exercises, like, you know, working on your muscles. How often do you put yourself in unfamiliar circumstances when you're uncomfortable? That's really the test. Okay, so Tim Ferriss, if you've ever read his book, The 4-Hour Work Week, one of the preliminary warm-up exercises, he says to, like, make yourself feel comfortable with uncomfortableness. So here's one of his ideas is, you're on a street somewhere with people, pre-COVID, and you just lie down on the sidewalk, laying on your back. Just lie flat. Lay there for 5 seconds, get up and keep doing what you're doing. Now that might make you feel a little uncomfortable. People would think I'm weird, or, you know, but think about that. It's not against the law. It's not harming anyone. It's just your own comfort level. Let's try something now. I actually want you to do this with me. Hold your hands up like this. Okay, go ahead. Now clasp them, intertwine your fingers. Okay, now, most of you probably put your right hand over your left, so well, however you did it, don't undo it. So what I want you to do now is, like, open up your fingers, slide the other way, and re-grip. Now, doesn't that feel weird? Yeah, and think about it. It's such a tiny little thing. All you did is, like, which way you decided to clasp your hands. But one's like, it's uncomfortable, it's unpracticed, I'm not as fluent at it. So I guess the point is, if you want to have an interesting life and connect with people or learn anything, is keep putting yourself into uncomfortable situations. And it's harder and harder to do as we get older. There's a study that says if you didn't try sushi by the age of 35, there's a 90% chance you'll never try sushi in your life. So a lot of decisions just kind of narrow. We get used to our habits and ways of doing things, and we stop doing anything new. And I think one of the tricks to a good life is, and connecting with other people, Adelina, to answer your question, is to make yourself uncomfortable and put yourself in new situations.
Kind of interesting that example you gave of laying down in the street. Okay, that's kind of an that could be seen from two different angles. That can be seen from the perspective of the guy laying in the street. It can also be seen from the perspective of the person walking by and seeing the person laying in the street.
Exactly.
And if you go back to, or if you look into Milton Erickson's work, who was the hypnotist, the psychologist hypnotist of the 40s, 50s, he would say that if you put yourself in an odd situation, like what you're talking about, that you would immediately interrupt somebody's conscious thought and could at that moment penetrate their subconsciousness. Okay, right at that moment. That was one of the things that he would do in order, like if he had somebody that wouldn't go along with his pattern and his way of doing it, he would do something suddenly.
Yeah, a pattern interrupt. That's what I call it.
Ericksonian pattern interrupt. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So pattern interrupts are important. You know, one of the reasons, I don't know if you've seen it, but I designed my book cover to literally have a caveman jumping through a box at you. Okay, and it's burgundy and mustard colored, and he has this wild hair and an aggressive mouth and beard. You know, people are like, well, that's not a very friendly book. But I'm like, but you noticed it. If you're going to see it postage stamp size on Amazon and buy it or not, and you have some other milquetoast cover in pastel tones, you're going to remember this book. So pattern interrupts are very important. I'm also reading a book by Jamie Mustard right now called The Iconist, The Art and Science of Standing Out. This also has some interesting things to say. I'm not quite done with it, but about what gets noticed and how to stand out. So yeah, I think that's an important concept. But my point about the exercising your mental muscles of putting yourself in uncomfortable situations or unfamiliar situations. Like, for example, I'm white. Okay, there's all this Black Lives Matter stuff. I'm rarely in situations where I'm surrounded by mostly black people. My comfort zone is mostly white people around. And just think about, when was the last time you were the minority in a social situation, the visible minority? How did you feel then? If you don't stretch or bother to expand those social tribes, then you're never going to really understand them.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have had periods in my life where I was thrown into other races, other cultures, other stuff.
Socioeconomic classes. When was the last time one of you took the bus? I mean, pre-COVID. It's like probably a while ago. So, you know, unless you live in an urban core or something like that, but you get my point, that there's just certain things you don't do, and they seem really strange and unfamiliar. And the point is to stretch. That's repeatedly. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah. How does the Mankind Project fit into this for you?
Oh, God. Yeah. Well, that's what I get for having a client on the call and a friend who knows more about me. The Mankind Project. Mankind Project is an organization that was founded about 40 years ago. It's spread worldwide. And the basic idea behind it was that a lot of the issues in our society are due to the fact that men are not properly initiated into full adulthood and what it means to be an authentic full man. And a lot of our social and problems are caused by that. So it's an attempt to repair that by having you go through kind of an initiation ceremony called the New Warrior Training Adventure. And one of the things that I love about it is that in my particular kind of group that I did this weekend initiation through about a year and a half ago, there were people range from 25 to 65, some were professional, some were blue collar, some had significant, past trauma, addiction issues, mental illness, abuse, some were ostensibly healthier. But one of the things that made me realize is, again, that widening or broadening of your circle is the fact that we share so much more in common with each other than the specific differences. And so it's that universality that we're all really in the same boat, and to come at things from that perspective, that's one of the most powerful things I've gotten out of it.
Yeah, because I was interested, so thanks for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a great organization. The US chapter is mkpusa.org. And I encourage any man really to go through that weekend, and you get to sit in ongoing groups in your local area for free for the rest of your life too, and continue your personal development work. So definitely I've taken advantage of that. Just had my group last night. But it's all over the world, from New Zealand to South Africa to Germany. There's chapters everywhere. Yeah, their website sucks. I haven't helped them with it yet. Yeah, thanks for that, Brad. Other questions? I think, Erica, you haven't asked.
Do you know the meaning of life? No, never mind.
To me, 42.
42.
Yes, thank you, Allie. People that have read
42, right?
42, yes. Life, the universe, and everything. That's the answer.
But you know why?
Right.
Why?
My favorite piece is the reason why it's 42.
Go on.
Because in binary, it means everything, or whatever you want. So the meaning of life is whatever you want.
I like that. It's kind of true. We make it up as we go along.
But if you do it in octal, it's a whole other thing, isn't it?
Oh, geez, the nerds are you've been let out of the cages. No, go on. So anyone else has a question?
I guess would be, my question would be, because I had seen you speak 12 years ago when you just came out with landing page optimization, and I work for a newspaper now. And when I first started 2.5 years ago, we had 7 days of print, and now we're down to 3.
Sorry, can you get a little closer to your mic? We're having a hard time hearing you.
Oh. That's why I've been on mute, because I'm at work right now, and so I keep getting calls and things. I guess our biggest thing as a paper, because we used to be 7 days a week, and now we're down to 3 days a week, is how to get through to the millennials and say, hey, you want to get your news from us because, you know, we're professionals and we, you know, staff journalists, instead of just going to YouTube to, you know, get all of your information from some person that probably maybe not even done with high school. And they take it for like the gospel, like my son. So I didn't know if you had any suggestions for that.
Yeah, well, so what you're talking about is like, where do we get information and what to do when there's information overload? And basically, if you want to go after an audience, the premise I'd start with is go where they are. So if you need your newspaper, your physical paper delivered to you, you're probably a baby boomer. Okay.
Yeah.
I read as a Gen Xer, I read the New York Times still, which is a newspaper, but I read it in the, New York Times app on my phone. Okay. Some of them, like you say, I mean, they might be getting news from TikTok or YouTube.
Yeah.
So what's stopping you from at least having hooks or lead-ins or connection points? Go where they live. I mean, you should be posting videos, short 30-second, 1 minute videos on YouTube, building up something for them to look at there. Or again, I wrote my book and I prefer to kill trees and physical books, but apparently a lot of people like ebooks and audiobooks. Some of you have my audiobook. It's not my flavor, but I'm just going to go wherever my audience is and give it to them in the format that they want it. That's kind of my starting premise. You can't make them go back to a habit that they will that you use just because you like it.
That's been a big challenge. I've been in how can you say it, in long-term negotiations to acquire the library of what many, and not vast many, but a good hunk of musicians, composers, arrangers, and associated people consider to be the library of the 20th century's best or close to best pedagogist in that. And the problem is that in obtaining the library, it's ancient. Okay, I mean, it was written as he was getting older and getting close to the end of life. I mean, he was trying to put this school together, and it's video and cross-reference documents that it's almost impossible to imagine somebody today picking the materials up, regardless of the fact that currently, under the current owner of the stuff, you could go and spend $2,000 with them and come away with a 2 to 4 year college degrees material. So I've been in contact,
and that's the point. Is it's the container matters, and really think of it as information is freed up from the container now. You don't need to be literate anymore. You don't need to learn how to read. We use emojis. We're back to hieroglyphics like the Egyptians used, and the reason they did is because it was obvious. A picture of a bird. It's a freaking bird. Okay, that kind of symbology is easier, and just like a picture of a airplane or smiling emoji is understood by everyone cross-culturally. So you have to really adapt to the way people want to receive information. The container doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be written on a scroll of vellum. It doesn't need to be in a printed book. I mean, books had a good run, but these may be the last days of books, for example. So you have to adapt, and even information on demand, or not even time shifted, but when I want it, why do I have to wait for my TV show every week? I just want to watch it whenever I feel like it. So you're seeing those usage patterns change as people get more used to information unmoored from its containers. So,
but aren't you saying though that the container matters more? The current container matters more than the last container.
What I'm saying is, go, if you're trying to chase an audience, go to where they live. Go to whatever delivery methods and containers and communities they operate in. You can't change their habits. You can only co-opt them by participating in the venues where they live.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other thoughts or comments? They don't have to be questions for me, but just observations.
Send the Amazon link over. I'll take a look at the Amazon link. I might end up buying you a book, Timmy.
Well, all the information's on primalbrain.com, or so easy enough to find it.
But see, it's on there, but that's 10 years ago's container for finding information. You know,
you busted
that's
me.
so dated now to have a URL and all that stuff.
Well, I'll make it easy for you. I'll put it in the chat so you can click on it.
There you go.
The different triggers. There's a good buddy of mine who spoke at my conference a long time ago, BJ Fogg. He's the head of the Persuasive Technology Lab at Stanford. And he has this behavioral model, which I really like. He says for any behavior to occur, you need 3 things to happen at the same time. You have to have a motivation to do something, the ability to do it, and then a trigger or a convenient way to get people to act on it. And all those 3 have to come together at one time for the action, the desired action to happen. And so I just gave you an easier trigger. Click on a link. So if you are thinking about information spread or persuasiveness, often the easiest thing to change is the trigger. How much easier are you going to make it for me? For example, my buddy Dharmesh Shah, he was the CTO at HubSpot, and he's really good at social media stuff. So when they'd have a blog post, how likely are you to share a blog post on social media? Not really, okay? But what he did would have tweets inside the blog post, so call outs or key sound bites, if you will, and all you had to do was click on it to tweet it. And that sound bite went out with a link to the whole blog post. And he had 10 to 1 of those than he did the blog post being reshared. The tweet happened with the push of a button. It was nicely formatted, everything looked good, and the trigger was just so much easier that it caused 10 to 1 amplification of the content. So something else to think about. How easy is your trigger?
How do you relate your version of trigger to urgency?
Well, that goes to motivation and ability. So let me give you an example. Motivation, I really want a Ferrari. Ability, I don't have $250,000 burning a hole in my pocket to buy the cheapest Ferrari. The trigger is, going to the dealership. Okay. So they're different. So motivation is probably more like what you're talking about. It makes you want it. That usually has to do with tribal affiliation and your value system and things like that. Yeah, great questions. I'm really enjoying this. I hope you guys are too. Other thoughts or comments?
What's next?
What's next? Oh, geez. Well, I described the process of writing a book, which is what I've been focusing on for the last 2-3 years, as the closest a man will come to giving birth. It's a protracted, painful process. It's a bloody mess by the time you're done. And then the real work really begins. So what's next is me publicizing the book in various ways and getting the word out about it and having it impact as many people as possible. So you're going to be hearing a lot from me. There's lots of great content. I'm going to be featuring some of it, trying to get out to as many venues as I can. Obviously, public speaking at in-person events, not an option right now, but I'll probably be on a lot of podcasts. I can pretty much guarantee you that. Yeah.
What attracted you to come to live in the US?
It wasn't actually my choice. My father was from the Soviet Union many generations back, but he was ethnically Jewish. My mom was ethnic Russian. And in the early 70s, that was the first time you could emigrate from the USSR. Wow. So I was only 8. My younger brother was 5 at the time, Artyom. And so it was kind of like, cool, an adventure. So we left Russia. We spent a week in Vienna, Austria, 3 months in Ostia outside of Rome in Italy, and then ended up in the US. So all I knew about in Italy, they had much better toys. They had cowboy hats and cap guns and like not cheap, crappy Soviet toys. So it was an adventure for me, but I didn't even know that anything fundamental was going to change for me.
and how much it impacted your tribe?
The way when I talk about tribes, there's some that people are more anchored to, but I want you to think of yourself as a overlay of many tribes. So it's not just a tribe. Okay, so I could say I'm from the immigrant tribe, more specifically from the Soviet Jewish immigration tribe, okay, in the U.S. Or I could say I'm a Mercedes-Benz owner. That's another tribe. Or I'm an artist or a photographer, or I'm a physically looking white person. So there are other, or the streamlined haircut tribe, which Brad shares with me. Aerodynamic haircut tribe. So there's lots of different tribes, and depending on the context we're in, one of them is going to be dominant most likely. So just think about what choices are you making based on which tribal identity you're currently activating.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the final soliloquy of Matt Smith as the doctor in the very last scene that he was in.
Okay, you're getting me with all these obscure references. I'm not catching that one.
This is a fantastic reference. You should see the last scene of him, because he says that we're all different people, but the whole thing is that you have to remember the different people that you were. And as he's about to change into the next doctor, and it's just the way that he acts it. It's one of the great little small vignettes of
when you say the doctor, you're talking about Doctor Who?
Doctor Who, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Matt Smith was the doctor after David Tennant and before.
The only one I remember is the British guy with the scarf. That was, I'm dating myself again,
well,
but I'm
David,
kind of like the fly in amber in that one.
Yeah, well, you should catch Matt Smith's final episode, and watch the last 5 minutes of it, because you don't need to know any of the other things. But he does talk about how we're all these different people.
Yeah, and then the thing is, just the final note on this is another chapter I have in the book is about memory. There's no such notion as a life review, unlike the Black Mirror episodes. We can't like rewind our life or replay scenes. The vast majority of what we do, gets ignored, unless it has a kind of a evolutionary, or survival implications for us. We just tune it out, and that's 99.99999% of the information impinging on us. And memory is not there to be accurate. It's again to help us survive, and it's very distorted. It fades over time. We can't control it, and so who you are is really the sum total of your current environment and being. And memory is just this kind of wildly inaccurate, distorted echo of the past. And only very salient, strong things from the past tend to be remembered for any length of time. So I like the idea of other selves or past selves, but really there's, I believe, kind of the you of the present moment and how you're impacted by your environment. So again, that's a bit of a philosophical digression, but there it is.
Thank you so much for doing this, Tim. This has been so much fun.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. I hope you guys got some useful stuff out of it. Thank you all for joining. And again, we'll probably put this replay up at some point on the website. So thanks for being in my first AMA.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, Tim. I'm sending you this.
Sounds good, Mark. I'll look for it.
Okay.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.